Kansas, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in Lawrence, Kansas, with Matt and Tim. And yeah, and we're going to do this here at the church because I'm here this week for my Doctor of Ministry cohort on campus week. And so these gentlemen graciously agreed to give me a little bit of their time to talk about their book. For those listening, I am holding up a copy of the fabulous From Trust. No, I get it backwards.
Yeah.
From Distrust to Trust. That's kind of the way this should go.
Right.
From Distrust.
We don't want to write the book
to Trust.
from trust to distrust.
Right.
That's a different book altogether.
That is a different book. So, controversies and conversations in faith communities. So, Matt, Tim, thank you both for being a part of my little in-person experiments. I appreciate it very much. So, I guess for those who don't know you, Tim, would you like to tell everybody who you are and a little bit about yourself?
25 words or less.
25 words or less. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I am the unusual one because I'm not a reverend. Although I have been to seminary, but I have 4 degrees from 4 different colleges. Arts and science, what was then home economics, the master's degree, which is now human services and something. Education was my counseling psychology degree was from School of Education. And then I went to Central Seminary for a Doctor of Ministry after I retired 35 years as a clinical psychotherapist.
Oh, wow.
And community mental health.
So you've just collected degrees as you've
Right.
Yeah.
gone on.
Good professional.
Well,
Mhm.
I mean, I think they should give you a pass on the not being a reverend and all that, considering
Well, good.
everything that you've done. So, you know, I
Thank
think
you.
you're fine.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Matt, why don't you introduce, I mean, in case somebody doesn't know you, right? There's
Wow.
got to be a couple people.
Yeah, right. So I am a reverend, pastor here at First Baptist Lawrence. Welcome to our incredibly dated looking library.
Again, we're giving you a pass on
Yeah,
that.
right. And have been at Lawrence for 13 years, a little bit more than 13 years, senior pastor here, and have been in Kansas now for 20, and it's become kind of home. And this is where our kids have been raised. I have 2 kids, and my wife's a public educator in the local school system. And so, yes, this is just now got to the finish line of the year. So yeah, she's all is well. And so and that's our life, and love doing ministry here, and it's a good place to be, and great people to do it with, and including folks like Tim, and we're happy to be able to do some cool stuff.
Yeah. So
Should I do the family part?
if you want,
Okay.
you can talk about your family.
Well, I'm in a blended family, which gives me 13 grandchildren.
He collects degrees and
grandchildren.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So I think when you get into big numbers, it's hard to keep track. But I think we have 6 children, including our chosen daughter, Dezo from Haiti, who has given us 3 of the beautiful grandchildren.
I love that. Chosen.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so 13 grandkids. So is it like there were 9 of us on one side of my family? So is it like when everybody's together, you just go through everybody's name until you get the right person? Because that's kind of how it went in our family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
it
Well,
didn't.
you don't even have to be all together to do that.
Exactly. And then finally, my Nana would get frustrated, or my grandma, if and she just go, whoever you are, I don't, that kind of thing. She just gave up. So you're the pastor, and did you already attend church here? Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been here, I think, 18 years.
Yeah, you told me
Oh,
before
so
I was here.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
I heard Tim was a member here, and so
Matt's like, that's the
That's
church.
That's right.
That's the one.
Well, maybe I should say that this is the first time I've been a Baptist. I've been a member of 5 different denomination churches in my lifetime, but this is the first one that's a Baptist church.
Okay, so this is the keeper then. I mean,
It's the best. Yeah.
I mean, right. I mean, I'm ordained Baptist too, so I won't argue with you there. So you wrote this book together. Whose idea was it to like? Hey, I mean, do you just like go, hey, it's Tuesday,
That's right.
right? Let's write a book.
We did that.
Whose great idea was this? How'd this happen?
Well, it started with I did research for my dissertation,
Okay.
which is basis of part of the book, and I wrote an article for Good Faith Media, actually 2 articles summarizing it, and then Matt and I had a conversation. Was that in the parking lot church that we started?
Yeah.
I think.
Right.
Yeah, this was
right.
COVID, so we were in church in the parking lot.
Car church.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So
yeah.
you did that during COVID.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and I brought, my thesis from my DMin
Mhm.
about preaching through, hard conversations and congregations, et cetera. And so we both kind of said, hey, it'd be kind of fun to do an article together, right?
Mhm.
And Tim had already published, and he said, hey, this could be a way to do that. And so we said, well, I don't know, it's a lot in there. Maybe we could do a series of articles. And then we said, and then just kind of like we kept
Right.
building. We're standing here in the parking lot in car church in the middle of COVID, and be like, why don't we write a book?
There's nothing else to do.
That's
in a
right.
pandemic. Let's
Exactly
write a
right.
book.
Right.
Right. So you took your stuff and just put it together, and voila. I mean,
Well, it wasn't quite that
It was a
easy.
little more than well. Yeah, I mean, I think there was. We brought those pieces, right, and those were some of the pieces, and we also felt the need to add more and kind of augment and also take out some. I mean, it's
right.
a lot of stuff that each of us thought is absolutely golden words that everybody in the world would want to read, and we thought the more we talked about it, okay, maybe that goes on the cutting room floor. And so all of these things came together, and through a couple of years process, really. Made it happen.
And several rewrites.
Yes,
Several
that's right.
rewrites.
Yes,
The biggest being after our, well, it's the biggest, but our senior editor, Rachel Lawrence, gave us some really good input after we turned in the manuscript, saying, well, it would be more interesting if you move this up to the earlier in the book and things like that, which really helped make it more readable, interesting.
I mean, interesting is always, is always good. I happen to know that Rachel Lawrence,
Yes, I know.
I can yell across the office in her direction at her. I won't, because people don't like that, but I could take my Nerf gun that I hide in my office and shoot her. I don't know if it'll shoot that part. I should try that. I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you, audience, on whether the Nerf gun can be shot from my office over to Rachel's.
Yeah.
But somebody might not get very happy. And anyway, so who's this book? Who's the audience? Who's the intended audience for this book? Anybody? Everybody? Church people? Non-church people? What are we talking?
I think church people first and foremost. I mean, it's about. I mean, the basic reality, the basic assumption that we bring to it is that churches are dealing with a lot of political division. I mean, the political division of our world just seeps into churches, in some pretty, complicated ways. And so as churches are then trying to make decisions about how are we going to engage that world, how are we going to respond, how are we going to make choices, then they've got to kind of decide how to be church in new ways, right? And you'll see a lot of churches that tend to go into one political ideological camp or another. But then there's a lot of these kind of, it's an overused term, but purple churches that kind of balance, have a foot in a lot of different camps and try to figure out how do we stay together when all these social dynamics out here, all these cultural dynamics say No, you have to literally hate the person in the pew next to you. And so that is the kind of stuff that we say, all right, in those kind of specific situations, how do you make hard decisions? How do you have hard conversations with each other? And so I imagine, there's some stuff I'm preaching in there, so I imagine some preachers as part of it, but church leaders or just somebody who says, man, our congregation needs to have a conversation like this. And so I'm going to get the book and maybe take it to my my council meeting, or take it to so somebody who's involved in the church enough to say, this matters enough. Let's do this.
I think that's a great. I think that's a great answer.
But I think it also generalizes beyond the church, and that's where the controversies and conversations part is. That it is about relationships, which of course are part of any enterprise, and it is about difficult conversations, which we all, of course, have difficulty with.
Right.
And so it includes some guidelines that I think apply generally to any organization. But yeah, it is specifically based on our research was dealing with Christian churches, Protestant churches,
All right.
and the congregational model.
What do you think that biggest issue is? I mean, I know what my answer would be, but
I mean, the kind of like case study of the group is same-sex marriage. I mean, that really becomes. I mean, it's getting ready to split a denomination. It's split churches. It's split families. It's split right, and so that's some of that. It's not just a church thing, but it's a big piece of it, and it's not the only. I mean, different churches will deal with that differently. Some congregations will have a decision to make about that, and others, polity-wise, that's not something they get to decide, right? And so they will perhaps bring a different issue to the table with something like this. But it's a pretty big one. I mean, it's a pretty significant question for a lot of folks right now.
Is it okay if the church is kind of ambiguous about that let's just put out there, the LGBT issue?
Yeah, right,
I mean,
right.
or do they need to say one way or the other, this is who we are?
Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, the congregational model is based that you get to decide.
Right.
Not all churches are like that. Some have the polity that the hierarchy decides, but I think on a personal level, everyone gets to decide. And it's challenging and difficult. Of course, the pressure to decide for the church came with the 2015 U.S. Supreme Court decision that said, yes, you can legally be married. And of course, marriages happen in church. Some marriages happen in churches. It's one of the things the institution of the church has done all along. So then that brings the question of, okay, well, what about same-gender marriages? Do we do those here? So that's kind of the start of the conversation, I think. And we have different models included here of different ways, which I think one of them is a church that both is pretty active on that issue, LGBTQ plus, we call it in the book. And they're also a relatively small church and struggling. And so they're also avoiding talking about it and making any kind of a explicit congregation-wide decision. And we have other examples from churches that we studied of ways of doing that. But ultimately, every church, every congregation has to decide on their own. And the book is kind of about, well, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah.
And how have others gone about doing that?
Which I think is a very important conversation to be having now. I mean, no matter what denomination you're in. I don't know ages of your kids, but mine don't. Like, I don't understand why the church is still having this argument, Mom. You know,
Right.
you're the pastor. You tell them
Right.
that
Yeah.
that God is love,
Yeah.
and and love is love, and I don't get why we're still fighting about all of this.
Right. Right.
So, but we are.
Yeah, that's right. You
And-
know, and we talked over time, over the book, over Tim's work, etc. Or what we decide 7 or more churches, and then we kind of took these different into kind of different categories of kind of case study or amalgam churches. And one thing that we saw again and again and again in this is that you've got some folks that say, "I can't believe we're talking about this. Obviously, the answer is X," and then other folks say, "I can't believe we're talking about it. Obviously, the answer is Y," right?
Mhm.
And a lot of that's generational, but not only. And so folks are saying, "Well, why would we even need to talk about it?" And because X is not Y, that's why we need to talk about it. That's and very clearly, some churches can move forward without a policy or a statement or a whatever, but it's still there. I mean, what happens when somebody walks into your office and says, "Will you or won't you?" Right? And so I think there's going to be those kind of questions that continue to present themselves in every church in America.
And I guess it just comes down to your own personal convictions. Really, we're
Mhm.
Baptist,
Mhm.
and we have that option
Right,
to go.
right.
Fundamentally, I'm good with Jesus and and these things. But when it comes to here, that's, I feel like, my own decision to make. But when I served as pastor, same.
Mhm.
There's that fear
Mhm.
that if we make that decision, if we say we are X or Y,
Mhm.
then we're gonna lose those people
That's
that we've
right.
been,
That's right.
Mhm.
But if we say that we're X, then maybe all these people that have felt like they couldn't come to church because we didn't, maybe they'll finally come,
Mhm.
but maybe they won't because we waited
Right.
so
Right.
long
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much emotion to all of this, right? There's so many painful journeys that folks have walked through, and I mean, a lot of the churches. I mean, some of the churches that we talked to didn't want to have a kind of a final voice in this because it was such a painful experience for them. We have a whole chapter on other voices, knowing that we don't have all the answers, obviously, and so we have kind of a more confidential way have let folks kind of name their own story and tell their own story, and these different stories then we put together in a chapter. And some folks that we really wanted to hear their story just said it's too much, it's too soon, it's too hard.
Mhm. Well, and I would add that of those 6 who did write, 5 are females, and it's a mix of clergy and laity, 3 and 3,
Okay.
3 of each. And so we just thought that was a really important part of our writing, that it wasn't just our voices, but this is what other people have said about the experience. One of which I wanted to add is a church that thought they had decided, because the elders, the board, had decided that, and we will not have same-sex weddings in this church. Well, then they had someone come out who was LGBTQ, and the pastor said, "I can't decide this on my own. We all have to decide," which their process didn't really go very well. It depends on, I guess you get to define what going well is. But it didn't, I say it didn't go well because it ended in a church split, which doesn't have to be. It's not always the case, which is part of why we wrote the book. That's not the outcome you want. In fact, it's been said that's every pastor's nightmare. But I will throw in that in that particular church, both sides accused the other side of not believing the Bible.
Mhm.
So it's just that kind of tension and that kind of personal conflict basis. But that church has survived and continues to not only exist. I think they're thriving. I actually haven't visited there recently.
The church that split
The
is now
split,
is
yeah.
now,
Yeah.
It did not end the church. It's
That-
still
and
alive.
that they're thriving. That
Yeah.
that makes my heart happy.
Mhm.
Really, that
Yeah.
you can
Mhm.
go, okay, this was really hard,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
painful. I mean, let's
Mhm.
admit there's a lot of, this was I'm sure for some of these people, this was the church they grew up in. They
Oh,
got
sure.
married
Yeah,
and those
yeah.
kind of things.
Mhm.
And now,
Mhm.
because of their convictions, they can't be there. But to hear that they are thriving,
And
that gives me hope.
the ones that stayed were the ones that were open to otherness or alterity, people who are different. And so you have to read the book to see. But
I know I'm trying not to give too much of the book
Yeah,
away, but
yeah. But one of the statements that I really cherished, that I found most interesting and useful, was that some people left,
right,
and so they had fewer people in leadership left, and so they had positions open. And what happened was people who had not been stepping up to do things in the church fill those positions. And so it's kind of like a new church, which we call the Elastic Church.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That something beautiful and lovely has
Right.
come out of that.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I guess another reason we wanted to write the book is there's a lot of guides out there to say, here's how to bring your church to a place to conduct same-sex weddings, right? This is our final goal, right? And our goal is that may not be where your church lands, right?
Mhm.
And it could well be that there is a decision that's made in a healthy way, and a decision that's made in again, we use this word alterity, just thinking about otherness, those outside, and how can we be elastic to people not like us in the pews next to us, and then outside of the church, right? How do we kind of open our eyes to that idea, and so then it becomes a conversation of, okay, where will we land, right? Will it be a matter of this is the decision we make, or we decide not to decide, and maybe this is kind of where we need to be for the moment, and so we kind of play with some of these different ideas throughout the course of the book, and ask, what does that look like on a practical basis?
And there isn't condemnation for those who decide that we can't get to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I
um,
mean, I think that's where a lot of churches are, because a lot of churches are going to say, that we talk a lot about the consensus model, right? To say this is what we can be together, right? And we can be this, and we can be thankful for being this, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go farther than where this group of people can go. And there's value in going farther in some cases. But for a lot of churches, they say this is where we need to be. And there's kind of a beautiful thing that can happen when they do that. If they do it in a healthy way, right? If they do it in a way that kind of respects a lot of other voices.
I wish this book had been available, honestly, as a resource when I was serving as pastor. I mean, I remember one that we used was God in a Gay Church, or God and a Gay Christian. But it just didn't get you,
Yeah, there are a lot of good books out there to kind of help think about the scriptural issues and the theological issues of gay marriage, and that's important to talk about, right?
Right.
But this is a different thing,
right?
This is talking about how, with those realities, then how do we institutionalize it, right? How do we make a community able to be faithful to each other, faithful to God, right? And that's where the trust comes from.
Right.
We're trusting God and we're trusting other through these processes.
So if you were defining the word trust, I mean, that's for me, that's a big.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Okay, we've only got 5 letters, but that trust is a huge.
Mhm.
How do you define
Mhm.
Well,
trust?
trust is inherently interactional because it involves two individuals.
Mhm.
Can be two groups. It gets big, which is part of the complexity of it. And it is personal because it is a personal decision for each individual to make. And one of the things that we emphasize is that safety is a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't trust someone if you don't feel safe with them.
I agree.
And so the vulnerability is a key aspect of it. And in the building trust cycle that is in the book, it really starts with humility, which is the individual humility before God, before others of, I know better than you. We have differences, but we're also similar. And so that kind of honesty is the beginning part, and sharing that, yes, I have problems, you have problems, we all have problems.
Right.
And we can work together and can help each other. And going a little further with it, away from just trust, but the paradox of it is, in the end, that through helping the other, we're helping ourselves. Through supporting the other, we're supporting ourselves. Through serving the other, we're serving our own ourself, and as well as God, or we like to think as God intended.
Right.
Yeah. We use a lot of metaphors. It feels like the most significant way to talk about this stuff is in kind of parable form or metaphor form. And we talk about elastic is one of those, and we talk about how sometimes the church needs to be like sandpaper, right? It's a hard conversation. It's kind of rough, but if you don't do it, then you're not going to receive the beauty of a beautiful piece of wood, right? And then, of course, the primary metaphor at the end of the day is the body of Christ that says, I can't, be the arm that tries to cut off a leg, right? That we do need to be for our own self, but also for other. We need to be able to trust. And so I think that's what the New Testament is trying to talk about in body of Christ is a kind of a baseline of trust.
Yeah, I think that ultimately the trust that the congregation has to have is in you as their leader, that okay, we might feel about things ideologically be in different places, and that's okay. This isn't about my agenda, okay, knowing what I do, I can work with all sorts of pastors and congregations, no matter what they believe. Yeah. Is it something that, some of them, I have little feelings about it. Let's just be honest.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I am going to treat them any differently than the rest is and I think that's a big part of it is that belief, that trust in this one, that they are going to do the very best that they can, despite.
Yeah, and I think that's a big piece of. We talk a lot about leadership. Actually, we talk about what's the role of clergy, what's the role of a non-clergy, a moderator, or a church leader. We talk about how other voices in the congregation really have to be, at some level, have to be attended to in this. And so we find leadership in a lot of different places, in a lot of different ways. And even the model of preaching, we talk about preaching in a way to evoke trust, that it's intentionally about how do I not, I got all the answers because I went to seminary. I'll give you 20 minutes of those answers today. Right? But instead say, okay, how can I learn from all voices?
Yeah.
That, let's put scripture next to my own experience, next to your experience, and all of these together, and say, how then can we together try to figure out what's going on in this passage, and then how do we figure out how that impacts our church?
I like that. I like that a lot. Did you learn anything about yourself in this? Sorry, I didn't prepare you for that one, and I don't.
Yeah.
That was just one that was like, ooh.
No, that's
Did
good. We
you-
talked about how honest do we want to be, because this was not easy to take
Right.
two different
How
authors,
honest do you want to be?
right?
Yeah.
Two authors with very clear perspectives on some of this stuff. We had to learn to trust each other in this, and move from a place of, I don't know if I like the way you said that, and I don't know if we should write it that way, and moving through that, I think was pretty significant.
Right. Yeah. That we, well, and it is all about relationships.
Right.
And even though we had known each other for, I don't know, 15 years, 14, whatever it was, and liked each other, but then when it gets down to, well, should it say this or should it say that? It's kind of a push come to shove situation, and that's painful. And I'm glad that you shared that, this is about feelings. We all do have feelings. And so that's one of the I think valuable things I've learned as a psychotherapist, is that it is all about emotion. And actually, emotion is truth. What's going on inside tells the truth about self in relation to environment, world around us, more than what's going on in my head. So we really have to be aware of that. I guess we don't have to be, because many people
We should be. We should be.
In order to communicate
Yeah.
and interact effectively, self-awareness is a very important part of it, as is empathy. Being able to understand the other person's feelings and respect that, and allow them to feel what they feel, and be able to stay engaged and interact and communicate and support each other as you learn from each other, as you share, and it's a developmental process then.
Yeah, as you can hear, I mean, early on, Tim, you said, I'm not a reverend, but I think there's such a value to have somebody from a different kind of voice participating in something like this, right? Because I think we do kind of get into our church speak and into our church, cycles and our church routines, and okay, well, this is how we've done it, and I think, one of the things that Tim brings to this is absolutely this incredible experience of, churches should learn how to talk to each other better. Communication really matters. Empathy really matters. A lot of the stuff that you bring from that therapy background absolutely is something that, is skills. These are all skills that the church leaders should know too.
Right.
And so I would say, who needs to get this book? I think anybody who's in church leadership can get this book. I think, though, when you really need this book, you really need this book. Like you say, there's a time when it's like, we're in the crisis now. How do we kind of guidebook out of this, right? Handbook out of this crisis.
Right.
And so I think there's some good basic learning that I've gotten from Tim in this as a church leader. And yet then it comes down to, but now it's hitting the road. The rubber's really hitting the road.
Right.
I got to really do something about this.
And from having read it, I try not to give too much away, but it's not anything that is over the head of somebody who didn't go to seminary or doesn't have advanced degrees. At least in my opinion, it's very readable for what people might consider the average, congregants, or even somebody who used to go to church but is sitting at the distrust kind of thing. Maybe reading this will help and go, hey, look, there's still hope that people every now and then people do change and leadership changes, and I think there's always hope.
Well, actually, the From Distrust to Trust, and the subtitle as well, was a gift to us from Cheryl Price. which we are very grateful for. But that really kind of hits a nail on the head, because it says there is distrust. That's a part of it.
Cheryl. I love Cheryl. How can you not love Cheryl?
Yeah. And so the distrust part of it is about kind of that other person that is different from me, and I don't understand, primarily because I don't know them. But so this process, I think sometimes the church process ends up being a process of, well, who do we want to exclude from our church? Who doesn't belong here?
Exactly.
And who are we going to let know they are not welcome here? Versus working at building trust, which it is work. It doesn't just happen automatically.
Right.
Working at building trust to be open and inviting and welcoming and accepting, and even including new people who are different and have different ideas and maybe different values, or even talk differently, maybe even cuss or smoke or do something.
Right.
But to be open, to not stay stuck on distrust.
Yeah.
That's them. This is us. We're very fine. Thank you very much. Stay outside of our door. Versus, come on in. Let's get to know each other.
Right.
Let's get a conversation going, which is, in the book we talk about it as a cycle of building trust. But it just starts with being open to a conversation.
And I think that welcoming, at least the way I think of it, always needs to go a step further. You're welcome as you are, who you are. We're not saying that you're welcome. Now we need you to change to be like the rest of us.
Yes, exactly.
No, you're welcome
to be who you are.
To be who you are.
That is the honesty part of it. That is, this is who I am. And the vulnerability part of it is, I'm going to let you know who I really am. And then the challenge for the interactional part is, how do you respond? Can you accept who I really am?
Yeah.
And if it's yes, well, that feels safe, and we can continue in developing and building a relationship, building trust.
Right, and that's what we call it a cycle, right? Because you do it a little bit, and then it's time to do it again.
Yeah,
it's time to do it again, and you just kind of keep building.
So you mentioned that you liked each other when you.
We used to.
Right, that's my question. I heard you say that we liked each other. So do you still like each other?
We came down in a good place.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we think a good product came from it.
Yeah.
As painful as it was, and difficult and challenging and time consuming and all of that, but yes.
I mean, I'll back you up there. I mean, not just because I love Cheryl Price and and Judson Press and all of that, but because I think that this is important work, and these are essential conversations that need to be had and not rushed into, but also we also have
not avoided. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, I'd go as far as to say I like Tim more after writing this book than before, right? Because I think at some point there was we have mutual respect for each other. We know each other at the surface level, and maybe a little bit deeper. I mean, we've served on committees, so on and so forth. But then going through the storming, now we can really start to see each other for who we are and kind of take that relationship to a different level. It's like, oh, wow, I just really value what Tim brings to this, and I enjoy, being able to talk on a level beyond, the work. The work was important, and now we can kind of from there have a different kind of relationship. So yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad that you're still friends.
That's right.
Because if you weren't, we would have to do this separately. Like I would have to do a one-on-one with Matt, which is fine. Which is fine, but also, it's nice for people to be friends.
Right.
That's right.
The debates are over.
Right.
We're all on the same page.
And you both you're both coming to Puerto Rico, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so both will be in Puerto Rico, and you know what? They've agreed to have a conversation with me again. And we're gonna add a third to this mix. That'll be really interesting to see how we can roll all of this in this. But you know, Curtis Ramsey Lucas and his book hashtag in this together. I think it kind of all should roll well together, and we can have a great conversation, and people that want to come out, and they can buy the book in Puerto Rico, or they can go to judsonpress.com and buy it now. I will put links below in the show notes. That's where I'll put them. We're at First Baptist Church Lawrence. Put your website up there if you'd like. If you're in the area and looking for a place to worship, you know, he's an okay guy. At least, you know, what I know of him anyway. And
we also have a website.
Awesome. We can
Distrust2trust.com.
Okay, so we will put all that in the show notes available so that people can just click on the links and reach out to either one of you if they would like to do that. Learn more about you, or you know, stalk you on social media, whatever, however that all works, whatever. And so as we kind of like wrap this up, we have to get to my favorite question of all, which is the joy question. So you both get the same question, because everybody gets the same question. It's this thing that makes us a community, that brings us all together, is joy. Because this is that thing that gives me joy. And I thought I turned my phone off, but apparently, anyway. So think about everything that you do in your life. Pastor, therapist, grandpa, dad, whatever. What brings you joy? You may answer that however you wish.
Well, I have an easy answer: is grandchildren.
Okay.
But I would add to that, actually publishing this book, it brings quite a bit of joy, because I first planned to write a book 50 years ago. I had hitchhiked across America coast to coast, and I thought as a 20-year-old that the whole world would like to hear about my experiences. So I dropped out of college to write this book. The problem was I didn't have any idea how to write a book, and it never happened. But finally, 50 years later, I get to be an author.
So this is actually a book about Tim's hitchhiking adventures. We have all this other stuff's kind of important, but you know, that's 10 pages of it. All the rest of it is.
Why am I just now finding out about the hitchhiking thing? Because
not too many people know it, but now I've let the cat out of the bag.
Well, we might have to have a follow-up
interview
about that.
Yeah.
Really?
Maybe I should write another book.
I mean, I'd read it. So hitchhikers across, and you're how old?
I'm 71 now.
No, how old were you when you?
Oh, I was 20.
You were 20 when you did that?
Yeah.
Of course, people didn't, you know.
Actually, I'm sorry I'm taking so much time. But I tried. I thought later that I'll just replicate it and then I'll write the book. And so I stood out by the interstate entrance, which you can only go so far in, for 3.5 hours one day, hitchhiking, and nobody gave me a ride. So I called my wife and said, "This isn't going to work like I planned." So you can't do that today.
That's right.
No,
Yeah.
right. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna write this in my book. Things that surprised me. Chapter. Wow. And you live to tell the story,
Yes,
which is. Well, I guess
there are quite a few stories, but I'll stop.
I mean, maybe we should talk about this as
Okay.
part two, a blog or something. I mean, you wrote the whole thing down, right? Because that
I lost
really
my
interesting.
notes.
Oh no! Well, that's better. You can make stuff up.
Yeah.
Right, and nobody will know the difference.
Yeah.
There you go. Exactly. Oh, wow, learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Okay, follow that.
I can't follow that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, one of the things we wrote about in the book is that we both find joy in being outside and camping and that kind of thing. And I think there's a joy in that, and so I can enjoy being with family when we're sitting out on the back deck. I enjoy going for a run in the woods. Right? There's a way we've kind of folded this into the church with our creation care ministry, right? And all so these different pieces together. I just like being outside, whether it's in the middle of the night looking up at the stars, or sitting out on the front porch and watching the birds, or gardening and doing some yard work and that kind of thing. I find this incredible joy and kind of a place of there's a lot of crap in the world, right? There's a lot of hard conversations that we have to have, and they're important, and they're ways that we can be a more mature church, yes. But alongside of that, there's just an opportunity to say, yeah, but I could worship in a way that is freeing and exciting, and again, get to go with family and friends and enjoy those relationships as well. And so there's a lot of joy in walking out the front door.
No, these are great answers. I mean, grandkids learning new things. I mean, yeah, there's not a wrong answer to. I'm just looking for people to go beyond the Jesus answer because
Oh, and Jesus.
Oh yeah, that too.
Right.
That too.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, give me more than give me more than just your Sunday school Jesus answer. Give me a little. I'm gonna need a little.
Right.
So
well, and one of the ways that's one of the ways I do worship.
Yeah, I think
pictures outside and say, here is Jesus.
Right. I know. I think it's beautiful and lovely.
Yeah.
You guys are fun. I appreciate you both, your time, and just sharing the book again from Distrust to Trust. Look, I got it right this time.
Yeah.
Controversies and Conversations in Faith Communities. JudsonPress.com. I will put up their websites, all of that in the show notes for everybody. And if you're coming out to Puerto Rico, come by, watch us have conversations again, and come meet them. They're signing books. I'm sure they'll write you a nice little note or draw you a picture or whatever you want.
No, you don't want that.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, and
stick figures. Stick figures.
Whatever, stick figures work. And we thank everybody for watching, and you can catch us Mondays at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And thanks to ABHMS for letting me ramble and do all the fun stuff that I get to do, and meet some incredible people along the way and share small pieces of their stories. That's what brings me joy. So
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Meg.
thank you all.
Thank you.
And we thank you all for watching.